Good evening, and thank you for joining tonight's informational panel on fair and affordable housing. My name is JD Masueda Arias. I'm the Director of Programming for the CHCI Alumni Association's D.C. Metro chapter. On behalf of the chapter, we want to thank CHCI for supporting tonight's event, and to our partners as well, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the LGBT Congressional Staffers Caucus, the Senate Legislative Staff, and the Congressional Black Associates. I also want to thank our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedule to speak with us, and for CHCI alumna Alia Ferrio for spearheading and moderating tonight's discussion. I'm honored to introduce Alia, who served as a CHCI CHCI Housing Graduate Fellow from 2016 to 2017 with both the Department of Housing and Urban Development under Secretary Julian Castro and the House Financial Services Committee under then-ranking member Maxine Waters. Alia?
Good evening, everyone. Bienvenidos. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight. I want to start by sharing my own personal story as CHCI Housing Graduate Fellow in 2016-2017. As a graduate fellow, I was living with 3 other fellows in my cohort, and half of my income was going towards rent in DC. And at the time, I was in one of the cheapest neighborhoods in the district. I had no idea what I was getting myself into moving to DC. Like, I wasn't familiar with the housing market. So tonight's panel is really kind of a culmination of years of really wanting to put resources together for current program participants and alumni across the country to really understand what is this housing crisis and the housing unaffordability crisis that we're all feeling today. Fast forward to 2020, I bought my first condo and became a first-time homeowner and was really, really excited, but it was a long journey. And it was only because I was so clued into a lot of the programs and assistance that are out there that was possible. During the pandemic alone, rent and house prices have increased nationally by nearly 18%. Over the last 40 years, I think rents across the country have increased upwards of 400%. And we all know where wages are today and have been over the last decade or more. Meanwhile, interest rates are rising in the face of inflation, and it's making it harder for us to really think about becoming homeowners. It's becoming harder to afford rent. So tonight we're going to hear from local DC experts on different programs and resources that are available. And while they're based in DC and a lot of the information is DC based, I know that people are joining us from across the country. And rest assured that each of our panelists actually represent organizations or types of organizations or offices that are located in probably your local community. And we'll be sharing resources after tonight's session to make sure folks are equipped with resources in their own community. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. Tonight, first person joining us is Susie Mclanahan. She is Fair Housing Rights Program Manager at the Equal Rights Center. She joined ERC in August 2016 and currently serves as the Fair Housing Rights Program Manager. In this role, she oversees all fair housing programs, staff, and activities. Prior to joining the ERC, she worked as the education coordinator for the Kansas City Anti-Violence Project in Kansas City, Missouri. In that role, Susie provided trainings and technical assistance regarding domestic violence and sexual assault in LGBTQ+ communities, so that service providers could better support queer and trans survivors. Susie graduated from the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas, with a Bachelor of Arts in Global Studies and International Studies and East Asian Languages and Cultures. Susie?
Great, thank you. So excited to be here. Let's see, I think the slides, great, amazing. So we're gonna first start by talking a bit about fair housing. As Aaliyah said, I'm the Fair Housing Rights Program Manager at the Equal Rights Center. Next slide. The Equal Rights Center is a civil rights organization that identifies and seeks to eliminate unlawful and unfair discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations in our home community of Greater Washington, D.C. and nationwide. And one of the reason I'm here today is to talk specifically about fair housing. Next slide, which I think one more, there we go. Is based on, in 1968, the Fair Housing Act was passed, and it protects individuals from discrimination in housing. So this is a federal law, and then there's also local fair housing laws that protect people from discrimination. But I want to briefly touch on the Fair Housing Act first. Next slide. So the Fair Housing Act applies to all housing-related transactions. This applies not only to rental, but if you're also buying a home, if you're getting a home mortgage, if you're getting homeowners or renters insurance. It also applies to homeowner associations, condominium associations, and housing cooperatives. So the Fair Housing Act is actually quite broad in that it's looking at pretty much any sort of discrimination within the sphere of housing. Next slide. So underneath the Federal Fair Housing Act, which applies to anyone located in the United States, it is illegal to discriminate based on seven different identities. And those identities are referred to as protected classes. So the first identity is race. There's also color. National origin refers to not only where you are from, but also where your family is from. So say, for instance, you might have been born in the United States, but a housing provider says, I don't want to rent to a Spanish speaker. That would still be national origin discrimination because it's based on presumptions about where your family is from. Familial status refers to the presence of children under the age of 18 in one's household. So any families with children, minor children, are also protected from discrimination. Disability, religion, and sex are also protected. And sex was recently, the definition was expanded or interpreted to clarify that not only applies to your sex assigned at birth, but also your sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, in Washington, D.C., on the next slide, we have actually significantly more identities that are protected. Due to the brevity of today's presentation, I'm not going to cover them all, but a couple that I just want to flag for folks is that age, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression are all protected. One of the most rampant types of discrimination we actually see in the district is source of income discrimination, which is discrimination against individuals based on how you pay your rent. And we frequently see discrimination targeted towards folks with housing vouchers. If you are located in Maryland or Virginia, source of income is also protected, as well as sexual orientation and gender identity. And there are also probably local protections. For instance, like Arlington County or Alexandria or Prince George's County would also possibly have additional protected classes, and actually do have additional protected classes. So if you want to see those, we're actually going to drop a link in the chat so that you can check based on where, like, what city and state you're in, what your local protected classes are. Next slide. So what I want to focus on is what housing discrimination may actually look like. And when we say the words housing discrimination, frequently we think of discrimination towards someone who's a renter, like who's, just a straight out refusal to rent. And that is one type of discrimination. So for example, a Arlington renter contacted us because she had been texting a landlord at a house that was a group house. So she was going to do a room rental. And the landlord had been trying to text the current tenant that he didn't want to rent to her. And he accidentally texted her as well saying, I think she's African, give her the wrong address. And while she actually was not African, she was Black American. This was considered both national origin and race discrimination because he was making presumptions about her identities. In this case, she only knew that she was actually experiencing discrimination because he accidentally texted the group thread instead of the tenant directly. And so I think this actually highlights that even blatant discrimination can actually be almost invisible if you because we don't necessarily know what's going on. The DC housing market units go really quick, so it can be really difficult to know whether you're experiencing discrimination or whether units, are just being rented. So if you think something's off, you can always, contact the Equal Rights Center to see if we might be able to assist or get a better idea of what's going on. Another example of discrimination is properties that refuse to accept TIN numbers in place of a social security number. There was, I think, a mobile home park in Northern Virginia that essentially switched to social security numbers as a way to target undocumented Latino immigrants in that mobile home park for evictions. And this was ultimately seen as a form of national origin discrimination. And another type of discrimination we might see is where landlords are applying different terms or conditions, where they might be targeting people based off identities, once they've moved into the units. So for instance, property management might target a family with children for lease violations. So even if, multiple units might be doing the same thing, those lease violations are only going to families with children. Next slide. Other types of discrimination include harassment. Unfortunately, a common type of housing discrimination is sexual harassment, which is illegal under both federal, so this is illegal nationally. We've seen an uptick in race and national origin-based harassment during the pandemic, especially targeted towards Black and Asian American communities. But any sort of harassment based on one's identity would be illegal. We've also heard some pretty harrowing examples, for instance, of harassment targeting like trans tenants as well. Another example of housing discrimination is actually, even though having a criminal record is not considered a protected identity, HUD, which is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, one of the agencies tasked with enforcing the Fair Housing Act, released guidance in 2016 clarifying that due to racism embedded in the criminal legal system, that targeting people with criminal records to screen them out is likely considered discrimination. So for example, if a property says no one with felonies can live here or no one with a conviction, that would likely be considered discrimination based on race or national origin. And one of the other most common types of discrimination we see is actually towards people with disabilities, where a landlord, property manager, condominium association, what have you, refuses to allow a person with a disability to have a reasonable accommodation, which is an exemption to the rules or general practices by a housing provider so that that person has an equal opportunity to live there. Really common examples include allowing emotional support animals in no pet buildings, or allowing a wheelchair user to have an assigned accessible parking space in front of their unit, even if parking is generally not reserved. Next slide. I also want to just briefly touch on possible discrimination as a home buyer. An example that I think I've heard more about in the last couple of years is steering, where you are pushing people, where a real estate agent would push someone to, or encourage them, towards a certain neighborhood, simply based on stereotypes of, wanting to live. And for instance, like pushing a Latino home buyer to Spanish-speaking neighborhoods. So for instance, say someone in DC said they wanted to live in Columbia Heights and the real estate agent only showed them units there, that's totally fine. But if they were working with a Spanish-speaking home buyer and said, oh, we're only going to show you units in Columbia Heights or Hyattsville, for instance, that would be considered steering. We also see lenders steer people of color and especially Black borrowers to mortgages with less favorable terms, such as higher interest rates or higher fees, which would be considered race-based discrimination. Banks, if they refuse to approve your mortgage application until you return to your home from maternity or parental leave, this may be considered sex-based discrimination or familial status discrimination. And recently in the news, we've seen a lot of coverage on home appraisals where homes in especially majority Black neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color are being highly undervalued compared to majority white neighborhoods. Next slide. So what can you do if you might have experienced housing discrimination? Next slide. One is you always can file a housing discrimination complaint. If you are in the DC region, you can contact the Equal Rights Center. Anyone throughout the United States can file a complaint with HUD. And in DC, the government agency that investigates housing discrimination complaints is the DC Office of Human Rights. Next slide. The ERC is able to assist folks if you think that you may have encountered discrimination. One of the most common things we do is we actually contact the housing provider on your behalf to try to address the possible discrimination. And we assist people with disabilities with submitting reasonable accommodations requests or modification requests to make sure that their rights are protected throughout that process with their housing providers. Next slide. We also assist people with filing complaints with the DC Office of Human Rights or the Maryland or Virginia agencies or HUD, because the process can be quite complicated and confusing to navigate. And we will serve as that person's advocate throughout the process so that they know what's going on each step of the way. We also do testing, which is where we send, if you're familiar with secret shopping, it's really similar, where we send people in where we, they are trained individuals where we assign them profiles, and the only difference might be their race, their national origin, or, their sex, sexual orientation, something like that. And we see if they're given similar treatment by a property manager, by a real estate agent, by a lender, to see, what might be going on and to try to identify more subtle forms of discrimination. And for properties built after 1991, multifamily housing properties, so like condominiums or apartment buildings, we also do accessibility site surveys to make sure they're following proper accessible design and construction laws. Next. So if you do think you've experienced discrimination, the most important thing is to document what happened, who you spoke to, as much detail as you can remember, and anything that you submit in writing, please make sure to keep a copy of. That's really important. Next slide. And yeah, so this is our contact information. I think the slides may be going out after the presentation, so we'll make sure to share that. And I think that wraps up my presentation. So thank you all for listening, and we can go to the next panelist.
Thank you so much, Susie. That was very helpful. We will be sharing slides after the session tonight. So Susie just walked us through our fair housing rights, which are really important, especially for our audience today. We have Latinos, we have potentially Afro-Latinos, Black community, LGBTQ plus community on the session today. So this is really important information, as our communities historically have been more subjected to these incidents of discrimination. Next up, we have Leslie Edmond, Housing Compliance Officer at the DC Department of Housing and Community Development. And she will talk to us about local DC programs that are available to folks. She has a background in civil rights, social justice, project management, and affordable housing. While at the DC Department of Housing and Community Development, she has worked in numerous roles, including 2 management positions. She has a penchant for business, process improvement, focus on local government, efficiency, compliance, and equity. She currently resides in Southeast Washington, D.C. with her son and enjoys cooking, traveling, and gardening. Leslie is a housing compliance officer and manages the agency's federal and local program requirements such as Davis-Bacon, Fair Housing, the Home Program, and CDBG compliance and project and program monitoring. So Leslie, I'll kick it off to you.
Thank you, Alia. And welcome everyone for attending this event. I think this is a great opportunity to learn about your rights and get information about housing and how to search for housing. Is the slide deck ready for me? Thank you. All right, so as Alia said, I am Leslie Edmond. I work at the DC Department of Housing and Community Development. Our mission is to help support affordable housing and community development. So we're going to move forward a few slides. Thank you. So DHCD funds about 14 different programs here in Washington, D.C. We provide services to residents, nonprofits, small business owners, as well as developers and community leaders. Some of the key programs and divisions within the agency include the Development Finance Division, which produce a lot of our affordable housing and our community facilities. We have a Property Acquisition and Disposition Division, as well as a Regulatory Administration that handles rent control. We also have a larger division, it's called the Residential and Community Services Division. And I'm going to talk about 2 programs that are within that last division of the agency regarding housing counseling, as well as the Housing Purchase Assistance Program. All right, so 3 of the key programs at DHCD that we monitor, we fund, and administer through partnerships with our community-based organizations. So first, we have housing counseling, we have the Inclusionary zoning program, as well as the Home Purchase Assistance Program. So I'm going to talk to you about our housing counseling program first. Within the housing counseling program, we have about 12 nonprofit organizations that provide services for the agency. They include rental counseling, IZ orientation, as well as homeownership counseling and the HPAP orientation. So it's critical if you're interested in becoming a homeowner or when you're looking first to find housing. I think it's very important for you to reach out to a housing counselor as you move into the district so you get an understanding of what the processes are here, get assistance about credit counseling, any information you need or support. A lot of times, even though most of us are well educated here within this cohort, we need to make sure we have all the information when it comes to the market where you're moving into, when it comes to rental, when it comes to sales. Okay. Additionally, for the IZ program, you're going to have to get an orientation. This is about 2 hours long. And so I'm going to go over some of the program requirements now. The Inclusionary zoning program, it is a program that we have established through legislation here in the district. So it requires that about 10% of new housing developments, well, not 10%, it requires about 10% of the units in new housing developments, including some renovated developments, have affordable units. So these include rental units as well as condos and townhomes. So most of the units that are for sale are condos and townhomes through the inclusionary zoning program. So these units are restricted to persons that are below 80% of the median family income. So we have 3 buckets. You see 50, 60%, and 80% of the median family income. And if you need more information on that, you can go to our website. You'll see the household income limits. So it's based upon your family size and then income. So if you fall within those buckets, you should be eligible for the program. Another key thing to remember as part of the inclusionary zoning program is that no more than 50%, you cannot have more than 50% of your actual housing costs for an IZ home, okay? And it includes, all of your income before taxes. So we want to make sure that the unit remains affordable for you. You cannot be enrolled in a full-time college or university program. You must live in the IZ home as your primary residence, and you or someone who will live with you may not own other residential property at the time of lease or purchase. Now, the last point, it's very important to remember this. If you or someone doesn't live or work in the District of Columbia, the odds are going to be very low that you're selected for a unit that comes available in the lottery. So next slide, please. So how do you begin the process? So you have to go to the 2-hour orientation. You can visit the DHCD website. You're going to see several of our housing counseling grantees there. You can pick one, and you must go to that orientation. You'll get a certificate. And you also must make sure your certification/registration is current. So every 2 years, you're going to have to update your registration to apply for a home. So after you do that orientation process, you're going to receive the certificate. Then you're going to go online and you fill out the registration form. So now you're on the list of registrants. You have to complete this in order to be registered for the program. So once units become available, you will be contacted after you're registered regarding, the household size, what type of unit you're looking for. Additionally, if you're purchasing a unit, you're going to have to attend an approved 8-hour home buyer purchase class, and then you'll receive a certificate. And so this is very similar to the Home Purchase Assistance Program, where I'll give you additional information. So see here on the slide, the link to our webpage regarding IZ. But for all rental units that are listed, that are IZ, you can go to dchousingsearch.org, and you'll see all the inclusionary zoning units once they become available listed there. the same for rental, the same for home ownership. But another great benefit of this website is that all affordable units are listed there that are funded by the district. Additionally, some units that are not affordable or income is restricted are also listed there as well, because it's a free service. Sometimes private landowners offer that as a service for free for you to search for units. They may not be the larger rental companies, but that is an option that's also available when you begin your housing search. So next, I will talk about our home purchase assistance program. So we have some key information. You can apply if you're looking to buy a home in DC, if it's your first home, or if you haven't owned a home in the past 3 years, you live or work in the district, and you earn a low to moderate income. Next slide, please. So key things about the home purchase assistance program. Again, it targets people who are low to moderate income, buying your home the first time in Washington, D.C. Up to $80,000 is available for down payments, an additional $4,000 for closing costs. If repayment is deferred for 5 years, and in some cases, you may not actually have to pay the loan back. Next slide, please. So we also have an employer-assisted home purchase program. This is if you are a DC government employee. There's no income cap, so meaning it's not income restricted. You get $20,000 for down payments and matching grants up to $5,000 for closing costs. And you do not have to pay this back either unless you sell, refinance, or buy another home. So the next two programs I'm going to talk about are very specific. So we have what's called the Negotiated Employee Assistance Home Purchase Program. So if you work for DC government and you are a member of a union that's subject to a collective bargaining agreement, you may be able to receive a grant from $3,000 up to $26,500. And after 5 years of living in the home, after 10 years of living in the home as your primary residence, that grant can be forgiven. And so we also have a very special program for first responders here in the district, which you'll see on the next slide. This applies to public school teachers, firefighters, police, and emergency technicians working here in DC. You get $10,000 for down payment and matching grants up to $15,000 for closing costs. If you meet these requirements, you do not need to pay back these funds as well. All right, so how do you begin the home purchase process? So of course, as I mentioned earlier, you need to go to housing counseling to decide, are you ready? This is a valuable tool. I have myself been to housing counseling as part of my housing search process. You'll see whether you're ready. Do you have the money for a down payment? Do you have enough money in savings for an emergency during the process? Also, I want to advise you too, the process may take longer than you think it's going to take. So you need to be patient. You also need to be diligent. You're going to go to a 2-hour orientation, and you can do that through one of the housing counseling agencies you've already contacted or worked with. And then you're going to go to a home buyer training. Okay. And again, this is an 8-hour home buyer class. You have to complete it in order to move forward in the process. Once you do that, you're going to be referred to one of our administrators, either the Greater Washington Urban League or the Housing Finance Agency. You receive what's called a notice of eligibility. And if you qualify, you can apply for any one of these other 4 programs that I've talked about: the General Home Purchase Assistance Program, the Employee Purchase Program, the Negotiated Program, or last but not least, the First Responders Program. All right, I'm going to hand it off next to our partner at the Housing Finance Agency, which also has great information, great products. And additionally, you'll see Walda as well too, who is another partner with DHCD to give you great information about housing in the District of Columbia. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Leslie. That was very, very helpful. Like Leslie said, next we'll have Bill Milko. He's Business Development Officer at the DC Housing Finance Agency for single family. He's been with the Housing Finance Agency for over 6 years, and prior to that, spent 5 years at the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, most recently as the program manager for the state of Maryland's mortgage program. He has over 25 years of experience in the mortgage industry and is someone who helped me navigate the DC Open Doors program. So excited to have Bill, and I will hand it off to you, Bill. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the event. I always like to tell people you're not really trying to buy a house as much as you are trying to borrow a couple $100,000 from a bank. And so in DC, there are two main down payment programs, because when you are trying to borrow that much money from a bank, they want to know what your credit looks like. Obviously, they want to know what your debt to income is, what current debts you have compared to what your new mortgage payment is going to be. And when they look at your debts, they're only going to look at debts on a credit report, car payment, student loans, that type of thing. But in this market, the minimum required in order to buy a home is typically only 3% of the sale price, or 3.5%. There's two main loans that we do in DC, which are conventional loans, which require you to put the borrower to put down 3%. When I say 3%, I mean 3% of the sale price. An FHA loan requires you to put down 3.5%. If there's any veterans out there, a VA loan is the very best loan you can get. It's such a good loan that we do not even offer it through the DC Open Doors program, because it is such a good loan. The next best loan out there is called a USDA loan. The Department of Agriculture has to determine whether or not your house is in a rural area. They're the ones who determine it. And I know there are people outside of DC listening in. So let me be the first to tell you, there's no rural areas in DC. So you cannot get a USDA loan. So that leaves only conventional loans and FHA loans. And as I said, conventional requires you to put 3% of the sale price down. An FHA loan requires you to put 3.5% of the sale price. So that's how our program operates. When I say our, the DC Housing Finance Agency's program is called Open Doors. And we operate on the premise that if the borrower has the income and the credit, the only thing they're missing then is the down payment. So the amount we will lend you is either 3 or 3.5% of the sale price, depending on what type of loan your lender is giving you, whether it's an FHA loan or a conventional loan. So our down payment amounts vary, unlike HBAP, which gives out 6, as Leslie mentioned, they give out 6 different loan amounts. DC Open Doors, our loan amounts depend on the type of loan you're doing and then the sale price. We like you. We really don't love you. You have to pay this money back. However, you have 30 years to pay it back. There's no interest that will accrue, and there's no payment expected on your part at any time. You would simply pay us back if you were to ever refinance in the 30 years, you were to sell at some point before 30 years, or as I said, in 30 years is when our down payment money would be due. So the way we also operate is we do allow, and many of these programs allow the borrower to stack as many down payment programs on top of one another as you can. Leslie mentioned all the different programs available through the DC Department of Housing and Community Development, HPAP, EHAP, NEHAP. I have seen people stack those alongside the Open Doors. You can absolutely take advantage of all the programs. However, when it comes to that, you have to meet the more restrictive guidelines. And as Leslie mentioned, in order for you to take advantage of HPAP, you pretty much have to be a resident of the city. If you're not a resident of the city, you go to the end of the line. And believe me, as someone who works on HPAP loans, the line for HPAP stretches down Constitution, circles the Capitol several times, and continues on to Georgetown. DC Open Door says we don't really care where you currently live as long as you're going to buy in DC. The other thing about DC Open Doors is we do not care if you are or are not a first-time home buyer. Our program is available to repeat buyers. However, you cannot own another home anywhere in the world when you go to settlement on your DC Open Door loan. So if you are moving to DC and selling your old home in the morning and buying your new home in the afternoon, you can certainly take advantage of our DC Open Doors program. The other thing we offer through the Open Doors program, a lot of people are under the misconception that you have to put 20% down. You do not. As I said before, the minimum required with somebody with decent credit and income is either 3 or 3.5% of the sale price. Now, conventional loans do have mortgage insurance if you're not putting 20% down. However, that's the second thing that we offer through the DC Open Doors program, in that if you are not putting 20% down, the cheapest mortgage insurance you can get is through the DC Open Doors program. So essentially, we offer down payment assistance and reduced mortgage insurance, and that's only on conventional loans. And then the other big difference between the HPAP program and the Open Doors program is, in order to apply for Open Doors, all you simply do is choose a lender who participates in our program. In order for a lender to participate in the Open Doors program, we make them go through a training session so that they understand how the program works and they know all the ins and outs. And then that way, when their borrower is ready to buy, as long as they're working with a lender who participates, the borrower simply says, I want to take advantage of the Open Doors program, and the lender is the one who would essentially apply for our program on your behalf. So there's no extra steps involved as far as requiring you to attend anything. You simply tell an approved lender, and the lender would take over from there. Now, we have over 60 lenders, but like anything, we probably have about 20% of the lenders do 80% of the business. However, if a lender is on our list as an approved lender, that means that lender can certainly do your loan. And my job is to make sure that they know what they're doing. So I always encourage borrowers that you can certainly have your loan officer give me a call and ask if they have any questions as well. So essentially, to wrap it up real quick, DCHFA, we're not DC government, and no offense to Leslie, we're an instrumentality of the government. So we have our own down payment program, DC Open Doors. It can be used in conjunction with the DHCD's program, HPAP. In fact, you can use our program with any other program that you may find. There are federal programs out there that I have seen some people take advantage of. There's not too many, but the bottom line is you can stack as many programs on top of one another that you qualify for. So for Open Doors, you simply use a lender who participates. We'll provide the minimum and to get you into the house 3 or 3.5%. And then the lender does everything from that point forward. So if there's any other questions, I can put my contact, or I'm sure Aaliyah has it, but that pretty much was my presentation for the down payment Open Doors side of the program.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Bill. I will definitely share contacts for those who are comfortable with me doing that after the session. Okay, so I just want to say really quickly, as I mentioned before, this is all DC-based information, but everyone who's talked so far, there's probably an organization or a department within your local community that does the exact same type of work that the folks joining us today do. So just keep that in mind. Some links are being dropped in the chat so that you can find the organizations in your community. I know the homeownership lingo can be really confusing. So if there were things that you didn't know about what Bill was mentioning, no problem. We'll have the Q&A session at the end that you can ask those questions and we'll go through that. This is a journey that we're all on together. So just write your questions down and we can get to those. Our final speaker is Usda Loan, Chief Housing Programs Officer at the Latino Economic Development Center here in DC. She has 13 years of experience working at the Latino Economic Development Center. Prior to working at the Ladc, she worked with various nonprofit organizations throughout the DC area, including Carlos Rosario International Career Center and Public Charter School. She's originally from Guatemala. Usda came to the US in 2000 with solid work experience in procurement at one of the leading sugar refineries in the country. Usda started her career at Ladc as a housing counselor focusing on foreclosure, pre-purchase, and financial education. After 8 years of working in this position, she was promoted to housing counseling manager, overseeing all of these programs. She holds multiple certificates from NeighborWorks and Unidos US in topics related to housing counseling, foreclosure prevention, and financial capability. Usda attended the Business Administration School at the Mariano Galvez University in Guatemala. Her most recent accomplishment at Ladc was her promotion to Chief Housing Programs Officer in 2018, and I congratulate her for that, and I will pass it to her.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be in here today. So we are going to talk about what a housing counselor can do for you in this process. And so you can understand how we can help you. But also I want to share a little bit about who the Latino Economic Development Center is. Next slide, please. So Ladc is a nonprofit organization that has been serving the community for more than 30 years now. And our mission is to drive the economic and social advancement of low to moderate income Latinos and other underserved communities in the metropolitan area. How we do that is equipping them with the skills and tools to achieve financial independence and become leaders in their communities through homeownership, entrepreneurship, and also leadership development. We have assisted thousands of minority-owned businesses to achieve their goal since 1991, and also other. We have support the community to achieve other financial goals. In terms of our locations or where we are located, the organization started in the District of Columbia and slowly had been expanding around the metropolitan area. So our headquarters is located in Washington, D.C., but we also have offices in Wheaton, Maryland, Baltimore City, Arlington, Virginia, and more recently we were able to expand to Maya West in Puerto Rico. Our programs, we work with everything that is related to economic development. So our main departments are the small business development and micro lending and the housing programs. With our small business and lending programs, we support small business owners with loans from $5,000 up to $250,000. We offer credit building tools that can help the community to improve their credit or to establish their credit. We provide business advice and workshops, technical assistance for small businesses, resilience business corridors, and we have a program that is called Empower Women International, EWI. It's a program that focuses in immigrant women to develop their ideas. With our housing programs, what we offer to the community in the District of Columbia, we have a program that is to support the affordable housing preservation in the district. We also provide financial capability workshops and individual counseling, first-time homebuyer, and foreclosure prevention. And our more recent program that we add to the programs that we offer is tenant services program. Next slide, please. So with our affordable housing preservation program, what we do is to support tenants to preserve their units, to use the laws that are available in the District of Columbia to preserve their units. And also we support them to improve their housing conditions and develop their leadership skills. Next slide. With our tenant services program, what we do is connect tenants to resources. We help them to get assistance for rental assistance, or if they need to apply for unemployment, social security benefits, any resource that is going to help them to stay in their units. Next slide. So with our housing counseling program, we do a lot of education. It's one of the main tools that we use because education is very important in this work. We create curriculums for the services that we provide. We organize classes, go to our partners in the community to bring these workshops so they can learn about the programs that are available in the district and the programs that LADC has available for them. Next slide. So we provide the orientation classes that Leslie mentioned to access to the programs that are available in the district, in Maryland, and also in Virginia. But for the DC residents, we provide the orientation classes to learn about all the programs that are available for first-time home buyers, such as the HPAP program, the EHAB program, the inclusionary zoning, the tax abatement program. So there is a lot of resources that, as a first-time home buyers in the district, all residents can access. And the only thing that you need to do is to come to one of our orientation classes. Next slide, please. We also provide the orientation classes in Maryland. If we have somebody that is trying to buy a property in Maryland, or would like to buy a property in Maryland, we can provide the orientation class to learn about the programs available in the district. There are many organizations like Ladc that can provide you information about the programs. So with our first-time homebuyer education, we provide once a month the 6-hour workshop or homeownership training that is required in the metropolitan area to use the different programs from down payment assistance programs, closing cost assistance, or the inclusionary zoning, the MPDU program in Maryland as well. This class is going to allow you to participate in any of these resources available for first-time home buyers. So why it's important to work with a housing counseling agency or a housing counselor? A counselor is going to provide you comprehensive counseling to understand what are the resources, what is the process, what are the players that are going to be involved in the home buying process. It is a process, and that if you take the decision, it's a process that you are going to need to follow, that is going to take some time, and is also are going to require some steps. So it's important that you understand those steps, so you are not an easy target for predatory practices. So as housing counselors, our main goal is to create successful homeowners and tenants through training, counseling, and coaching sometimes. As I mentioned, the services that we provide as a comprehensive housing counseling agency, we provide pre-purchase counseling, foreclosure prevention, credit counseling or financial capability, financial management, rental counseling, and post-purchase counseling. Our objective is to support prospective first-time home buyers with their housing search, to understand what are the requirements in terms of credit, what is the minimum credit required for each of the available loans for them, to understand also what are the resources that are available for them in each area, in each jurisdiction, or where they would like to buy. If they need also support with their production, the housing counselor is going to be developing a budget with them and support them in making a plan to get to the optimal level of debt, savings, credit score to be mortgage ready and to make an informed decision and be successful homeowners. We also help them to understand their rights and obligations when they become homeowners. One of the areas that we cover in our counseling is financial capability, which is the beginning of everything. It is important that as if you had the idea to become a homeowner, that you start taking care of your financial health as soon as possible. It is important that you understand what is your income, how much you are bringing home, what is the level of debts, and the level of your savings, and how you can increase your savings to start creating an emergency fund so you can have funds to cover all the expenses that you're going to need to cover before going to closing. With our pre-purchase counseling, the housing counselors support prospective first-time home buyers in organizing themselves for a home purchase journey and making sure that these individuals have adequate financial health for a home purchase through credit, budgeting, and housing counseling. We also provide them with access to tools and resources to facilitate this process. And the last service that I'm going to mention today that housing counselors provide, any housing counseling that is approved by HUD or that is working with the Department of Housing and Community Development in the District of Columbia, Maryland, or Virginia, we provide foreclosure prevention. If you know somebody that is already a homeowner and is having troubles to keep their mortgage payment, is on risk of foreclosure or is facing foreclosure, we can help them to get the education and the counseling that they need in this process and to understand what are the loss mitigation options that they can use. We provide intervention so we can contact the servicer in behalf of the homeowner if we receive the authorization and negotiate for them and find out what is the best option that they can get to avoid foreclosure. And with this, I'm ending my presentation. I hope you get the information that you need. If you would like to learn more about the services that we provide, we can share the contact information also at the end of this presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so we will now open it up for Q&A. I don't think we have any questions in from the audience just yet. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and do like a lightning round of questions really quick. My first one is, Valda, being the Latino Economic Development Center, does Ladc only serve Latinos?
No, that isn't just our name. We serve all the communities. And as it is stated in our mission, we serve all the underserved communities or anybody that needs our services.
Perfect. Just wanted to clarify because I've heard that misconception before. Okay, Susie, housing discrimination. I feel like oftentimes we think about it as this like big overarching thing that like we don't really have control over. But we know it happens every single day. What is like one or two common things that people will say in the market that are discriminatory that maybe we as like everyday people don't realize are probably signs of discrimination and that we should just like keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I mean, one I think is especially for home buyers listening for coded language, especially racially coded language from real estate agents and mortgage lenders. I think ironically, actually, like non-Latino white home buyers are most likely to hear this coded language as they're discouraged from certain neighborhoods. You know, do you feel that this neighborhood's safe? Have you seen the crime here? That sort of thing. There was an investigation actually, I want to say in Long Island, New York, that really highlighted this issue. And I'd really recommend folks checking out that Newsday investigation as it really highlighted just this stark differences in ways real estate agents treat folks. And I think it really highlighted the second, thing that comes to mind is just how many times we talk to people who have called us and said, this happened to me and I'm just so used to it happening that I don't even know if anything can be done about it. Like, what really can what really can occur, what can really change. And so if something feels off, if something doesn't, feel like it's right or should be allowed, even if you're not sure whether it's discrimination or whether it's okay, it's always good to call and ask, because we, frequently see things that are troubling, that are outright blatantly discriminatory, and people, will say like, I just didn't think it'd be like, they said they could do that, so I didn't know that it was illegal.
Thank you. And last one for you. I've heard people say, well, I'm not going to report it because it's going to take too long to get it resolved, and I just don't have time for that, which is fair. I totally get that. It can be a burden to have to like go through that. But I think more big picture, like what is the benefit of people reporting discrimination if they think that they've experienced it?
Yeah, well, individually, a lot of the work we do is actually just helping individual renters or home buyers address what occurred. So for instance, we've talked with many people that have been denied housing due to having felonies from like the 80s or 90s, for instance. And we're able to appeal those decisions and they get access to housing. We help a lot of voucher holders get access to housing where they were told vouchers weren't accepted, even though that's illegal. And so on the one hand, if there's housing that you're interested in, or, there's a situation where you're living and if your housing feels untenable, maybe because you're experiencing harassment, and you want the situation addressed, that is one of the things we do, because we know that can make a huge difference in people's lives to have safe housing that, they can thrive in. Broad term, even if folks aren't interested in pursuing a complaint themselves, if they report it to our agency, one of the things that we can do is look further into it to see if there's a more systemic issue occurring, so that we are better able to address more broadly what's going on. We can't be everywhere in the market, right? So folks, for instance, that are home buyers and see things that, don't sit right. Like, even if home buying process is a whirlwind, like, especially when you are in the closing process, everything moves really quickly. And maybe you don't want to deal with it in that moment. But if you want to call us 3 months, 6 months down the line and say, hey, I had this really weird experience, this is what happened, I'm not interested in doing anything about it for me, but we just wanted to let you know in case there's, something broader that can happen. It allows us to have a better understanding of what's going on in the local market and better target, our efforts to address discrimination.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sure we have a lot of renters on, tuning into the session right now. There are just housing pressures across the board all over the country. Leslie, can you talk to us a little bit about either how we as individuals living in the district can become more involved in making sure that more affordable housing options are available, either that, or can you talk about some like recent efforts that you're excited about on like what the district is doing to increase affordable housing that's available?
Yeah, so in the last budget cycle, the mayor increased the amount of funds we have dedicated to the protection of affordable housing. So $400 million was allocated, and we just went through a large RFP process last September, and we have another set of applications that are going to close. So we've received a significant amount of applications. So I think we actually have maybe the largest trust fund in the country when it comes to affordable housing, even compared to larger states like California or larger cities. We've had the strongest investment. It's just the real estate market is very unique here. We don't have a lot of land to develop. About 40% of all of the land is actually either owned by the government or federal and local, or a national nonprofit, making it untaxable. So, we're limited by the height restrictions as well in the city. So we're not very dense. So you're not going to see the skyscrapers you see in New York City or San Francisco. And so we're taking a lot of efforts to be creative with the land that is available to develop. But we also have a really progressive inclusionary zoning program. So we take the actual funding that's available to us, federal and local, and we leverage that with the actual market to produce affordable units in every new housing development. And in that manner, we're actually able to expand the number of units throughout the city to people and put them in areas that are also high opportunity areas. Because as you're aware, probably nationally, you know that a lot of times affordable units have been segregated to some communities that have unfortunately been, subject to segregation economically, racially, socially, based on national origin as well. So we're taking lots of efforts and done work with the Zoning Commission and the Office of Planning to increase the number of affordable units all across the city, so everyone can live where they want to live and work where they want to live. And I just want to point out one key thing, like Bill said, if you're a veteran, VA is the best loan product you can get. But don't forget, like your bank also sometimes has down payment assistance programs that you can take advantage of too, if you've been banking at a certain bank or credit union. Thank you, Alia.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay. We have one question from the chat. We're at 7:31, so technically the event has ended, but if folks can stay on a few more minutes, I'm happy to do so. Feel free to jump off if you need to. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in. So the question here in the chat is, do you recommend going through real estate agents? Any pros and cons in doing so? I think this is a big consumer protection issue, and I'm curious what you all think. Bill, if you want to start, otherwise we can
I mean, I would say the bottom line is if you're serious about buying a house, at some point you have to talk to a lender. And almost every realtor that you talk to has lenders that they work with at some point. So sure, if you're going to talk to a a realtor first, that's fine. But that realtor is going to steer you towards a lender sooner or later, because they don't want to waste their time if they don't know that you're qualified to buy a loan. So yeah, you can talk to a realtor, but again, a realtor's first question is going to ask you, are you pre-approved? Do you have a pre-approval letter? And if you say no, they're going to say, hey, talk to my friend here. And trust me, they'll have 3 or 4 friends, business cards that they're going to direct you towards.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Martha.
Yes, I would like to add to that, to what Bill mentioned, that as a first-time home buyers, we don't know about that process. So that is the importance of working with professionals that are knowledgeable about programs that are available for first-time home buyers in the area. So as a housing counselor, we always are going to recommend to talk to a housing counselor and also interview 2, 3, 4 real estate agents or realtors and loan officers as well, to decide with whom you would like to work with and to understand the process, because if you understand the process, you won't be an easy target for predatory practices. So the more important tool here, I would say, is knowledge and education in the process, so you can take informed decisions and look for the best products and professionals that are going to be working with you in this process.
That part. I will just say, in my home buying process, it took me 2 years, many real estate agents, many lenders, until I landed on a team that I knew would advocate for me, but also I advocated for myself the hardest, because you really can't trust anyone. So that's very important, like setting yourself up with a team that you can trust and that you know is giving you accurate and fair information. We have another question here in the chat, which is a great one. So the inclusionary zoning trainings before COVID required us to go in person and go to these trainings, take time out of our day. But during COVID, those have been virtual, which have allowed a lot more people to attend and to make time for that. Will that continue once things transition to like post-COVID life? Whatever that means.
As far as I know, it's going to continue because the grantees are the ones that provide the training to us. And so that's a partnership that we have with them. They provide the service on behalf of the District of Columbia government. So we want to make sure everyone is safe and, comply with the COVID protocols, but also make sure you're comfortable as well. So we've seen a huge increase that I'm sure Walda can attest to, as well as Bill, in people wanting to purchase a home. That means people going to homeownership counseling, people going to housing counseling as well. And I want to echo what Walda said earlier when it comes to buying the home. Go to housing counseling first. Start early so you're comfortable and you know all of the details, just like Alia said. It takes a while, and don't count yourself out. Do not count yourself out thinking it's going to be too long or too expensive. It's worth it to find your, 10-year home, 15-year home, or forever home. Take the time and definitely learn as much as you can about the process, and pay attention to the fair housing section of the training, or call Susie, because you don't want to be discouraged by the process if you have one bad interaction with one bad realtor or lender.
Yeah. And on that point, when I started going through the trainings and the processes to get approved for down payment assistance, I ran into some hiccups. Like, I didn't have a DC ID. I didn't allow myself the time to go through the certification process. So, Wanda, can you talk to us a little bit about, if I'm a renter right now and maybe I don't want to buy in the next year, maybe I'm in 2 years, I think I'll be ready to buy. Can I start that process now? Should I start that process now in looking at the down payment assistance programs in DC?
Definitely, you can start with the process now. I would say the sooner the better, because even though you don't apply for the down payment assistance programs now, taking the classes, understanding the requirement, as you mentioned, having an ID from the District of Columbia or driver's licenses is important in the process, and that takes time, right? That takes you need to plan when you are going to the DMV and take time to do all those processes. So the sooner the better. Meet with a housing counselor, talk to the individuals that are available in the district, like loan officers approved by DC Open Doors, so loan officers that know about the HPAP, the EHAP, if you are a DC government employee. I would say never is too soon to start getting information, to start taking the classes. You can leave completing the HPAP or EHAP application for a little bit later, but the education part, the planning part is essential to start as soon as possible. Another thing also why is a benefit to start as soon as possible is to take care of your credit. And as I like to call, to take care of your numbers in terms of your credit score, your savings, the level of debts, and creating an emergency fund that is going to be really important once you start the process and once you enter in that property as a homeowner.
Okay. And the HPAP certificate, how long does that last for?
The probably you are talking about the letter of eligibility or the NOE. That is valid for 180 days. So that's the time frame that you can use your notice of eligibility for the down payment assistance in the district.
Okay. And Bill, I just had a question for you, but I forgot. So let me think for a minute and go to this question in the chat. I heard the DC Housing Agency recently changed the legally allowable percentage a landlord can annually increase rent. Can you share what that is?
This is for rent-controlled units. I don't have that information available with me tonight, and rent control is limited to certain households, say seniors or persons with disabilities, or if you are already living in a rent-controlled unit, feel free to send me an email and I can reply. You'll see on our website, we do have the information. And if you check out our Twitter, we've reposted some of the things from the Office of the Tenant Advocate as well regarding rent control. So rent control does not cover every rental unit in the district. That's like a misnomer or a misconception. It's only limited to certain types of units and households.
And there are rent-controlled units in DC. That's a key point. Like, people don't always realize that. Not every city's lucky to have that. So know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I can share more information about that too if you send me the email.
okay, perfect. I think this will be the last question unless more pop up. But Bill, you talked about the fact that, and this is true for DC district programs as well for homeownership assistance, that folks have to repay the assistance either when they refinance, when they sell the home, or otherwise. I've talked to some folks, some friends who are deterred from taking advantage of down payment assistance programs because of the repayment feature. But oftentimes, especially among like historically underserved people, like our families don't necessarily have the money to help us enter into homeownership. And these are often the programs that help us. What do you
I mean,
say about that?
I understand that. My daughter's a Prince George County teacher. When she took the Maryland money through their program, and it was only $5,000, and it drove her crazy, saying, I don't like owing anybody. I don't want to have any debts. And I would constantly tell her, it's a 0 interest loan. You don't have to pay it. And, you know, years went by. She had a 1-bedroom condo. Eventually she was like, you know, this is just too small for me. I need to get rid of this place. She sold her house and, of course, paid off the $5,000 then. And actually, when she came out of settlement, she goes, you know, now I understand what you were saying. I said, you know, if you don't have the money, borrow it from us and pay us in 30 years. Because when Ben Carson was the HUD secretary, he came to our agency and he said something that struck with me. The average net worth of a renter is around $5,000. The average net worth of a homeowner is around $200,000. So whatever you can do to become a homeowner, you should do. So, and you know, our rates with down payment are going to be slightly higher than the market rate with no down payment. That's kind of how we make our money. But, you know, I'm sure even though we're on screen and I look like I'm in my 20s or 30s, I'm actually well older than that. And when I started, 8.5% was a great rate on a 30-year fixed. And we spoke to plenty of people who had double-digit interest rates, 12, 17%. I know rates are going up, but again, our program is geared towards the only thing you're missing is the down payment to get you into a homeowner. So we'll take care of that for you. So yeah, if you've saved your own money, then it may not be necessary. But another important factor with us is, unlike HPAP, which says, here's down payment money, here's closing cost money, and you can't mix them. Open Door says, here's 3% of the sale price. Use it whatever you want to use it for. You can use it for down payment. You can use it for closing costs. You can use it to pay your mortgage insurance up front. So we don't have any restrictions as far as that goes. But yeah, I would say, sure, I hate people. I understand that. Like I said, my daughter was like that, having to owe money. And if you're buying, I just underwrote a loan where the sale price was $500,000. So they're getting $15,000 in down payment from us. They're also getting money from HPAP. And I would say those people are buying a $500,000 house, well, hopefully on March 11th, I believe, if HPAP is ready, I should say. But, you know, a year from now, that house is going to be worth well more than $500,000. So I would say whatever you can do to buy a home, do it. And honestly, it drives me crazy when I see borrowers chasing 1/8 of a point interest rate better. You know, to me, just get in the home. Mm-hmm. It's like, to me, I almost think like when I bought my first computer way back in the 90s when my brother-in-law was a computer geek. And he told me, once I buy the computer, and we spent like, you know, a couple $1,000s, he said, do me a favor. Don't look at computer ads for the next few weeks after you buy your computer. Because he said it'll drive you crazy that the prices are dropping. But that's just the fact that this market is like that. And I've always said the housing market's the same thing. Just buy the rate. And if you buy a house today and then a month from now the rates are lower, so what? You know, so what? And if the rates were lower a month ago than they are now when you started, so what? Buy the home.
Great.
Yeah, something that I can add with the HPAP program is that in addition of the benefits, that giving money right now to be able to accomplish that goal now, I know 3 or 4 years after, that can be the time that it's going to take you to save that money, is that it has a deferment period.
That's a good point.
If you are the ones that you are going to have to prepay the money, there is a 5 years deferment, no interest, never, that loan never will accumulate interest. So
Well,
it's definitely a lot of benefits in this type of programs that can help you to accomplish that goal sooner than the time that you can do it on your own.
I always say getting our money is like getting the money from a rich relative. They're a relative, so they're not going to charge you interest. They like you, you're related to you, so they won't charge you interest, and they're going to be pretty easy about when you pay them back. But they're rich for a reason, and the fact is they want their money back. So we won't charge you interest, but we do want our money back. Just like your rich uncle would probably want his money back if he lent you the money.
I love your analogies, Bill.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time for us today. We will be sending out, like I said, follow-up materials with everyone. If you have any questions, we'll share your emails if that's okay with you all. And thank you so much and have a great night.
All right, guys. See you later.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye, everyone.